Hello again, everyone. This is Stu Ellis with your Illinois Corn Connection, and a very special guest today is Phil Bradshaw. Phil's known to people around the world. Phil, Phil is a pork farmer over in the Griggsville area, former chairman of the United Soybean Board, and on his farm he's got a lot of corn and soybeans and hogs, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And Phil, you've raised hogs for a long time. You have fed them corn and you've fed them soybeans, and you've really taken those crops and added value by livestock feeding. But there's apparently some new information that that we probably didn't know when we were growing up. We knew that corn and soybeans were good for livestock, but what's going on here when we see that maybe there's actually more corn being fed if we feed soybean meal that's even a higher protein?
Well, yes, to me it just makes sense because you know soybean meal is higher priced than corn. So if we can, decrease the amount of soybean meal by having a higher protein, increase the corn, that makes a less costly ration for the pigs. To me, it just makes sense, and I think we've seen that all through the years.
And when we do something like this, you say it makes sense. We've got new research. Does it show you anything different than what you have either known or have felt over all these years?
Well, probably not as much as some because I've been involved in meetings and activities. But I've always thought that the biggest thing we had in our livestock ration, be it pigs, chickens, or cattle, is that, the cheapest ingredient, or one of the cheaper ingredients, less expensive ingredient, is your corn because it's in volume. So if we can replace, add corn, any place we can add more corn to it will help cut the cost of your ration. And the new findings that's been found out here, it's just, I can't believe it's taken this long for them to decide that higher protein soybeans will lower the amount of soybeans you have to use and increase the corn, cuts the cost of the ration.
That seems like a pretty easy way of figuring out extra money.
Yeah, and the biggest, I think it's still that way. Around 80% of the cost of raising a pig is the feed.
Yeah.
And so if you can cut that cost of feed with the volumes we're talking about now, you cut the cost of that ton of feed $3 or $4, you're really saving yourself a lot of money.
Now, when we're using corn as opposed to distillers' dried grains, basically we're feeding them extra starch, and that's going to change the way they metabolize and use that protein to metabolize and put on protein.
Yes, and some of the things that I think they've been looking at is, if farmers, we have to by necessity look at the economics. We can't survive out here if we're not economically viable. It doesn't matter because we can't survive. You got to pay your bills. But the thing we're now hearing is we're all concerned about the environment, and it looks like some of these DDGs and some of that are causing a little bit of bigger problem in the environment, and there's another reason to go the other way.
Okay, so if we can find a new use for DDGs that's maybe even higher value for them than feeding them to livestock, why at that point we've even put more value in that corn.
Yes, I would say so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Are we using less soybean meal at all?
Well, not substantially less, but you got to remember, soybeans is that miracle crop. We've all heard it called a miracle crop, and there's a lot of use for soybeans. Now, if you just start looking at all the new uses we have coming on all the time with soybeans, even if we do lose a slight little more, but the figures I've seen, now I don't know, I think you've seen the same one, like a pound of less of less soybean meal, I'm saying this right, will revert to almost 200 pounds of corn. Well, a pound is not very much. So if those figures are right, and I don't know if they're right or not, but if they are right, that's not much soybean meal you're losing. But it's a protein. It's an amino acid levels that you're increasing that decreases the amount you have to use.
1 extra pound of soybean meal for the protein that's in that will will increase corn consumption by 200 pounds.
Well, that's the figures I've heard. Now,
Okay.
Stu, I don't know if those figures are right, but
Okay.
that's the figures that's been tossed around them.
Okay. Well, that's substantial.
That's
So,
substantial. And the other one is, if you look at it from a total society thing, there's so many uses of soybean meal and soybeans. You know, I mean, they're every day you see another use for soybeans. You know, so all of a sudden, if you look at the total picture, more of the income from that soybean will come from other uses.
amazing.
Now, it is amazing. You know, I don't know whether you use at the Commodity Classic or not, but one of the contests, you know, that they have is they have a little contest every year. The U.S. Soybean Board does, of the best new products. And one of the new products that is making out of soybeans is a compound that will grow on your skin. And they introduced that down at the Commodity Classic last spring, and that will actually grow over scars, so they can cover people's scars up, have a scar on their face, cover it. Now, I've read a little bit on it. There's on the internet and stuff you see. Apparently, it's been approved for experimental use anyway. So, no end to what you can do with them. No end. You're looking out here at this asphalt road, you know. They're making roads out of asphalt, you know, soybeans, you know. Just no end to it. And so I think when you're talking about taking a pound or two of soybean meal out of the ration, it's not going to hurt the soybean farmer. And all of us farmers raise soybeans and corn anyway. So if we need a little less soybean, we'll raise a little more corn, you know.
That's right. Well, I don't know that we're taking out any soybean meal, but we're just utilizing the protein value from a higher protein soybean, and it means that we just don't have to feed that extra pound,
amount,
and we can go get a higher valued product of it by if I cut myself shaving.
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
I can.
And to me, that was just a fascinating discovery. And you know, the other thing is, you know, sir, that this thing in agriculture just keeps changing. You know, I'm sitting here looking out across the farm, and I can remember when we just thought, boy, we could just make 100 bushels to the acre, you know. And now we're looking out here, and some of the guys on their monitors and the combines going up to 300, you know. And probably all this ground we're looking at here is going to average over 200 bushels to the acre. And that's what's changed in my lifetime. You know, I wrote this book, Your Food, My Adventure, and in that I tell about how we raised pigs, you know, 50 years ago when I started. I talk about, you know, started out here, you had 70 bushels to acre corn. Now we got 200. It's just amazing to me. But I don't think we've seen a beginning. I think we're going to see even greater yields because we got our genetic modifications that we didn't have. I think you're going to see a more rapid increase myself.
All right. We appreciate the time here we spent with Phil Bradshaw of Griggsville, and that he mentioned his book, Your Food, My Adventure. It's a fascinating book, and it's available on Amazon. Can people get it off of Amazon?
Yes, and they can hear us through. Let's read it.
It's available in audio version as well. I appreciate you stopping by to visit with us today, and hope you got something interesting out of this. I'm Stu Ellis, and thanks for listening to Illinois Corn Connection.